Or highlights of the Nigerian Institute for Public and Strategic Studies, KURU, where course 46 members in the company of the Director General and other high-ranking members of the institute paid a visit to President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at the State House in Abuja, pledging dedication to cooperate in line with the Renewed Hope agenda. It's interesting to note when the humanoid robot named Mr. Hope will be ready for presentation. That's a key takeaway from that highlight visit. Now, turning our attention to our second half of discussion on the program, we're looking this morning to engage with Real Estate Developers Association of Nigeria, REDAN, and we have the Public Relations Officer here in our studio, Mr. Ajayi Franklin. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to have you in our studio.
Same here.
Now, it's important to note that your organization is the principal umbrella body for both the public and private when it comes to real estate, particularly the FCT, right?
Yes.
Now, it's at a time when a lot of persons are losing hope with the dream of being able to own houses in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Many blame it on the exchange rate. Many blame it on inflation. So I'd like for us to start our conversation off the back of how inflation influences land ownership in current day Nigeria.
Okay. I'll try to keep it simple because so I don't sound too technical. First off, REDAN is actually a national body. I'm only representing the FCT chapter. Now, concerning your question, unfortunately, most of our building materials are sourced from abroad. And that's why you cannot run from the foreign exchange. Now, there are a couple of them that you have to still get here, like cement and some other stuffs. There has been some level of low control, or do I say not serious control. And so you cannot dodge from, as far as the exchange rate keeps going up and all that, it basically affects directly the cost of building materials and all those stuff. Unfortunately, it drives up the price of building a house. Now you've seen the reflection on rentals in the past few years, about a year or two. It keeps going up. And in short, when you're hearing prices of some certain areas, you'll be wondering, are we still in planet Earth and all that? But basically, inflation, exchange rate basically affects housing.
Now, what's to still keep this dream of owning a house alive in Nigeria? It's interesting that you mentioned rent.
Yes.
At the start of this year, reactions came in from Lagos. Social media was agog with how much it costs to rent at minimum a two-bedroom flat in some eyebrow areas in Lagos. But in the FCT, up until last month, when some landlords began to emulate their colleagues in Lagos, we did see reactions. Is there anything your organization is doing to somewhat midwife this gap in what the purchasing power parity of Nigerians are and how much they have to spend on rent?
Okay, I'll start from, there's a time we're actually monitoring, there's a particular bill by, that was some 3 years ago by Senator Smart at Adeyemi to control rental. And if that bill had successfully been passed, we would have been able to have some level of control. But right now, there's no control. And so people can make reference to the inflation, the cost of building materials, cost of maintaining the house now has actually jumped. And so they will, because of that, and then cost of living, then up their prices. So the control is not that strong, to be sincere, because you are not providing the materials, you're not giving discounts, you're not giving any form of to help alleviate that pain to the builders. So you don't expect to ask them to, you can't come and tell them what they should charge and not charge. It's still a capitalist in society. So that level of control is not really there. What we now finally see is if we can now get, what we've been pushing, per se, is if we can get some level of, let's say, for example, we're trying to push something with the FCT, and we're saying, give us this land, we'll take care of things. We're actually still in discussion with the FCT minister, and with that, we'll be able to control, if that is taken care of, we'll be able to control the cost of building. Now, we've taken the cost of land off, and then we just know it's only building materials. It may be a little bit better. On the other hand, one other way we actually help REDAN has been helping with home acquisition is, if you notice, a lot of our members will come up with discount prices, special offers, spread, structured payments. Now, these are ways to alleviate that pain of buying these houses. Unfortunately, our mortgage system is not strong as what you have in the Western world, but we create all these opportunities so that you can actually save up or do a contributory thing to own at least a land or sometimes a house. So those are some of the things REDAN does. But that will do direct control, it's difficult.
Now, talking about land ownership laws, up until the current FCT minister came into office, in the FCT, land acquisition seemed to be a very rigorous task. Now, a lot of persons got skeptical when the land revocation began. Okay. Now, in keeping with land ownership laws, is there any cost on board by your organization to help break down these laws to Nigerians, particularly residents in the FCT who are now skeptical of purchasing land in the fear that it be revoked for infringements of the law?
Now, I believe that the government would not revoke a particular land without a reason. And if there be a reason, they will always communicate with whosoever is actually having that land at that point in time. However, what we try to do from time to time, because I'm also a member of the disciplinary committee, so we handle cases of where clients or allottees have issues with the developer, or issues with, maybe they even bring some of the issues of the government to us sometimes, which is beyond our purview. But what we try to do is to educate as much as possible. Like from time to time, we have events that is aimed at just educating the people on the do's and don'ts, the pros and cons. I mean, basically the ABC of land acquisition, the laws and all that. Yes, we carry out those things, but it's important that people understand that if you want to buy a property, do your due diligence. And if peradventure you have done your due diligence, you have a strong title, even when the government wants to revoke it, maybe due to overriding public interest, you will be compensated. Because most of those things, most of those ones that have been, some of them that have been revoked, had been compensated.
Now, some of this issue beyond your purview that
Yes.
Has been on your table owing to invitation from those who acquired these lands, would you care to give us an insight into some of the issues and how you have intervened in recent times?
Okay, we've had cases where, let me give an example. A particular person actually bought some property from a developer, and unfortunately, the government basically wanted to pass road through that place, and he had to now write everyone that, okay, this is the situation ground, and they've been reallocated, and I'd like to move everyone to XYZ. But the client actually felt there was something not right.
Some shady underhandling.
So he just went ballistic. And thankfully, he came to us. He petitioned the committee, and we invited. And when we looked at everything, we were able to break down, okay, this is the situation on ground. If you take this anywhere, this is basically the result you'd get. But however, this is how it works, and this is where we stand. At the end of the day, everybody was happier. We try as much as possible to direct everyone's attention to the right part. Even when our members are actually not right, we actually handle their cases.
Now, in terms of developing lands, I know the FCT is structured in terms of specifications of buildings.
Land use and all that.
Now, in a time when some lands have not been developed upon, I know there's also provision on the law on how long it takes before the government can revoke such undeveloped land.
Yes.
In keeping with some of the complaints of the current economic realities, is there any bridging relationship in what your organization does for persons unable to develop such spaces to avoid reclamation?
What we usually do is that, I usually say this personally, you must not get everything before you basically start. If you, as much as possible, you know that time is approaching, go start. Gradually do it. For me, investment...
Perimeter fence, or what do you need to start?
Not just perimeter fencing, basically start your basic construction. Now, for me, what I like to look at building is like an investment. Grow it gradually. If you're disciplined financially, you realize that you could do something, no matter how small, gradually. I've been in the business for almost 1.5 decades. And what I've seen commonly happen is most people, when they start, they don't have everything. In short, some of them will say, I barely was having enough to even finish the foundation when I started. But look, I finished the house. So it's a matter of starting. Just to avoid issues that has to do with revocation, you've exceeded the time you've been given and all those stuff. Just start, no matter how small. The truth is that there will always be needs. There will always be demands. The demands will usually outweigh what is the resources available. But it just requires little proper planning, and that's it.
Now, in line with the Abuja master plan, before Guzape became what it is today, it was basically future projections that this would be one of the highbrow areas in the FCT.
Yes.
And I'm very sure that 10 years ago, the prices of plots and even houses in Guzape now, as a case study, aren't what it is today.
You're right.
Are there some ways in terms of probably housing to rent schemes that developers in your business introduce to Nigerians that they're not aware of, that they should be aware of, to help them own properties in some of these high to reach areas which long before now were still affordable?
Okay, I'll start by saying this. The best time to buy property is now.
It's always on record that it's now, but
it's now.
looking
But
at the prices,
let me say
when you look at the prices, I doubt.
It's cheaper to buy now. I'll say this. The population will keep increasing, right? But the land does not increase. That means there will be demand for that land, which you cannot control. So the more the demand, the more the price will soar. So if you expect that the properties will maybe crash one day, okay, it used to be 20 million naira before, but now it's 200 million naira. One day we'll just wake up and it's now 10 million naira. Sorry, you have to wake up. The truth is that as far as there's demand, everybody wants to have a piece of Guzape or some of the highbrow areas. You make a little money. That's okay. I need to get something from this area. It will keep going up. That's the truth. But the best thing to do is to look out for some of the offers that's on the table. Look out for something that can fit your pocket. That's what I usually advise people. There's always something for everyone, no matter the financial level or the class. There's always something. I was talking in one interview, and I said, I had to say it in pidgin English. There's property for everybody, but now you define Guzape.
Quite right.
So the bottom line is, if you truly want to solve that housing issue, look out for something that can fit your particular level, and you realize you still stop paying rent.
I know there's this housing deficit we continue to talk about in Nigeria.
Yes.
The government on its
Scary.
own has its initiatives on hand. I'd like us to discuss the role of the private sector in this discussion in curbing the housing deficit gap.
If you look at the past 20, 25 years, when estate developers, private developers came into in space, before then, you realize that what was common, if you observe the FCT, let me use that as a case study, is that people would be like, in a small one-bedroom, maybe in the area of Area 1 or in Geriki, in a small one-bedroom flat, you have like 8, 10 persons. They just want to have a place to lay their heads and go out to work, then come back until developers came in and they began to open up Lokogoma axis and other areas, and then people began to own houses. The truth is that the government cannot drive housing alone. It does not have the resources to. It still needs to have influx of funds. If the developers were not part of this, no matter how much we want to look at it or paint it, the developers have contributed immensely to reducing that housing deficit gap. It's still a long haul. I've had cases like in the last year in October, I was at the African Union Housing Real Estate Conference, and we looked at what the government was doing in various countries to help in various African countries. I'm not even saying European countries, to help to take care of the housing deficit. They were not doing it themselves. They were providing enabling environment for the private sector to drive it, and at that level, they were able to control the cost of housing. They were able to put a peg. This is basically because they were the ones behind helping to make it work. You cannot be the umpire or the referee and a player at the same time. You basically model things up, especially when it comes to housing. No matter how fantastic a government is, there's some areas you basically have to play, and there are some other areas the private sector will play. The truth is, the private sector have helped so far. If you look at 70 to 80% of, if not more than, of the structures that have come up in the past, say 20, 18 years in the FCT, is actually from the private sector. Look at estates everywhere. People are beginning to own houses and then begin to look at more houses and all that. It's all the efforts of private sector. And you'll be shocked to hear how much of the sacrifices developers have had to make. People tend to see, developers have money, but they're forgetting that this line of business is capital intensive. So for every naira you see in the developer's account, you'll be shocked that 120% of that money, that means that money, and he need more, be used to meet up with that demand.
Now let's talk about your organizational structure. I know it's going to be a year since the FCT chapter got a new vice chairman, in Dr. Badewale Kayode.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's going to be any ceremonial occasion around his first year in the FCT chapter, but in terms of this access to capital, has there been improvements in REDAN's activities in also ensuring that as an organization you meet on your mandates?
Okay, well, he's the vice chairman. There's a chairman, Dr. Tony Okorua. He's actually a very fantastic leader. Some of us were in Turkey just last week. He returned for still a housing related conference, basically trying to draw investments to the FCT. What we've been able to do within the first 1 year was actually lay a lot of foundation for the benefit of FCT residents. And we actually have not discussed that at the executive level of any doing a ceremony concerning our 1 year in office, but we're more interested in the results we could actually give. One of the first things we've been able to do, I can beat my chest to tell you, is that we've been able to bring some level of sanity. Every profession has some erring members. One of the things we've been able to do within the FCT is quietly address some of the gaps of some of our members. We've been able to address some of those things, and we've been able to streamline and then build a better public perception of REDAN, because at some point in time, some of the bad eggs started giving us a bad name, and so we started addressing them, especially at the disciplinary committee level. We meet regularly to address this, and we've also started looking at, like we mentioned, the discussion with the FCT minister. We're also looking at, and the truth is that the real beneficiary for that packet plan is the FCT citizens. So if our interest is housing, then everything around making housing easier, more affordable, better, because not just providing a house, it has to be at least with some sensible living standard. So those are the things we've been chasing, and we've made some serious progress.
Well, I believe that the FCT and Lagos continue to be some examples of where mortgage accessibility can begin to work in the Nigerian context, much like what is obtainable in Europe.
Yes.
I don't know if there is a plan on ground in terms of a roadmap on how these two cities would pioneer this course so that Nigerians can begin to benefit of mortgage.
Okay, it's actually already on ground. There's the renewed hope housing. Yes, it's doing a whole lot. The president is actually doing a whole lot in that direction, and it's actually putting in the hands of some of the developers. Some of our members are actually driving it, and so we believe that in the next few months or years, as the case will be, we'll begin to see the benefits of that. Work has started in some places in Lagos and of course in Abuja. A whole lot. When I started saying, I said REDAN is a national body. So
FCT is just a chapter.
Just a chapter. So we've been able to do a whole lot, as not just the two cities, but Harcourt, just basically everywhere.
But you know why I keep saying Lagos and the FCT? Because honestly, when you look at it, people tell you those who are outside the civil service don't really get to benefit from some of these initiatives.
Okay.
Only if they come through umbrella bodies like your own that can sort of midwife public-private interest in schemes that are available and open to the public. Because like the renewed hope housing, even on its completion rates in other states like Cross River, where we had reports coming in from on the level of lack of completion of some of these projects, we only see Lagos and Abuja in terms of compliance because, of course, their interest, and I believe ESCOs, much like yourself, are much on their toes to ensure that these issues are delivered. So that's why we keep referencing Lagos and the FCT, if you understand.
It's true. And then it's a bigger market. That's the truth. We're actually driving a whole lot in that direction, and we're not relaxing or relenting in that in concerning that. But interestingly, what we've also done is that we realize that most of the private sector, which you just mentioned now, are not even aware that they could also benefit from the mortgage scheme. Or some of this renewable hope housing, they can also benefit. So most of the time, we also try to push through our events. There's some we've already planned for this year. Through these events, we'll basically conscientize or make members of residents know that even if you are not in the public sector, as a private sector, you're a contributor to the development of the city. Your business basically makes it, you pay your tax and all that. So you can also access federal government loans and mortgage, and you also can access those other houses. So we've been able to make that known, and then we're still trying to make this information.
Now in the FCT, especially around the satellite towns, there's this, I don't want to call it makeshift IDP camp, but that's the best way to coin it. You have property that has been undeveloped. You have persons who put up batcher structures and begin to reside there. They now have their own landlords who collect money and rent out some square meters of such places. I don't know if this has come to your attention as an organization.
Okay, a few arrests have been made. I think I was aware of something like that last year. I will have some in my one of my properties. So, but bottom line is, when you look at their plight, you basically have no other choice than to show some level of sympathy. That's it. But concerning those people coming, that's illegal. It's completely illegal. And I think that is for the security and all that. What we did in the last few cases when we noticed things like that, we just basically reported it and they took it up from there. I knew there was one time last year they made some arrests concerning such people claiming to be landlords.
Now, on house pricing, is there, I know you've talked about the fact that regulation cannot be a thing now, and you had hoped that the bill by Senator Adeyemi Smart had scaled it reading so that we can have something concrete on which we can hold on as law. But in terms of house pricing, is there any hope of stability? Now we're talking about, the exchange rates having been stable for a couple of weeks now. People are talking about the Naira appreciating. But the truth in Nigeria is it really reflects in our prices in the market.
Anything that goes up does not come down. It doesn't come down. But the truth is, we've actually considered this over and over again. But there's no law breaking where there's no law. You can't break a law that does not exist. Okay, and when a particular person is a capitalist economy we run, and when a particular landlord feels, okay, this is what I want to give my property for, he has not broken any law. That's what he wants. And so if you can afford it, fine. If you cannot afford it, that's a hard reality. But however, we've also looked at, we believe that the more we push to close this housing gap, the less the tendency, that means there'll be more competition, the less the tendency to have some unrealistic prices. Yes, there's some properties that are actually unrealistically priced compared to that same kind of quality of buildings around the world. In Africa, we've actually done those comparisons a couple of times where we hear some say this is luxury, but when you check what they call luxury in some cities across the world, it's a far cry.
Now, in terms of registration as an organization, is there openings for members of the public who are looking to come into this space in terms of development? Do they need licenses approved by your organization? How do they go about it?
Okay, you cannot go and start building without development controls approval first. And they will actually look at what professionals are you using to build your house. We've been having these issues of building collapse. Like I actually run a real estate conference every year. And I believe we'll talk about that much later, an international real estate conference and exhibition. And last year we talked about building collapse. Because of the engagement of quacks. That's one of the things, poor quality of materials. But the truth is that you must have good professionals that you basically will work with. If you don't have this in place, then you just know that you're preparing yourself for this thing. Then, if you're serious and you want to be in the business of estate development, it's only proper to be part of REDAN and all that. And there's a lot of benefits being a member of REDAN and all that. And so all these things will basically give you a lot of backing, so that in your business, in carrying out this business and all that. And there's a lot of information we share amongst ourselves, a lot of opportunities that are created and that are available as members. And these are the things that if you are part of us and you also take care of the other parts, like the professionalism, having the right professionals, and basically getting the right approvals, then you shouldn't be having a problem.
Now, let's talk about this exhibition and conferences. Quite thankfully, the news has not been agog with the number of building collapse we've seen.
Last year it was crazy.
And even the year that preceded last, we saw active steps in Lagos, where the Lagos state government embarked on demolition of houses that were deemed to have contravened building regulations and were built across jetties. In keeping with this drive to ensure that we have buildings that serve the integrity and stand the test of time, what does the exhibition conference do beyond advocacy?
Okay, like what we try to do with IRIS, the full body, REDAN was very fully involved in that. What we try to do is that we've noticed that almost every conference basically is just doing rhetorics, right? But we brought in every stakeholder. We heard that, we let them say their bits, and we also shared our talk. And then we followed up, apart from just having a communique, we also followed up. We actually came up with new plans, and then we began to follow up. Like one of the things we did with some of the professional bodies is that we pointed out some of the areas where some of the loopholes, the lacunas in their processes that were left out, that created those mistakes. And we were very thankful at the conference, and so they promised to begin to work with that. And for us, that was a success. At least being able to point out, because no matter how perfect the system is, there's still room to learn, there's still room to improve. And so what we tried to do was see how we can close every gap that would allow any quack to practice in the FCT.
I will go back to Lagos in terms of the slum areas, the Makoko area and whatnot. Over time, we've seen humanitarian interventions, but many have also suggested that there be some sort of government intervention in terms of building makeshift accommodations for persons like that. And in events when we have some floods in Nigeria across states, they ought to be buildings to more like shelters to absorb these people. But we continue to see dwellers of such areas resist the need to move. Some of them call it the ancestral home and have denied the intervention of government agencies and organizations much like yours. Are there hopes that persons who reside in this area in the near future would yield to this call to more or less be moved to safer grounds or even more habitable environments? Okay,
we've seen many cases where it has even happened in the FCT where some of the indigents will say, okay, we'll be asked to go either Morocco or Makoko, whether in Lagos or in Abuja or any other city, and they will stay put. I believe very strongly that if the government is serious, they'll go. They'll see if they're serious in providing an alternative. If you ask the individual, nobody really wants to stay in a slum. Nobody enjoys that kind of life. But what alternative have you given? What realistic alternative have you put on the table for the person? It's not just saying leave and come and stay in a primary school for now. No. What realistic alternative have you given? Now, we're also seeing cases where individuals were compensated. We're very interested. They will come back there. They were duly compensated. I'm aware of some areas in the FCT, they were compensated, but they came back and stayed. They've done like 10, 20 years now. But they're there. And they say, this is our land. But you've collected money for compensation to take somewhere else. And then some of them, they were giving some houses. Before you say Jack Robinson, they sold those houses, bought a car, married more wives, and they came back to that place. So so that's why I say, if the government is serious, there are some places where they were very serious. It worked. So why won't that same thing be replicated everywhere? If the government is serious and true to itself, they will leave.
Well, in closing now, it's on the question of what to expect from REDAN going into the year. Residents in the FCT, those interested in the real estate sector, are there programs and activities we should look out for?
Okay, yes, you should look out for IRIS, and then, but most importantly, concerning housing, we'll soon be coming up to talk about some particular fantastic offers that will be driven by REDAN FCT. We're actually working on that already, and once it's every T has been crossed and I's dotted, we'll come up to talk about it, and it will be very fantastic if you get to hear it on time and take advantage of it.
Well, emphasis on hearing it on time, and that's why ADBN Television thought it wise to bring REDAN. On board here is the PRO, Mr. Ajayi, who has taken our time to intimate us with programs, activities, and in line with the current market realities, inflation, the price of housing, rents, and also in terms of land ownership, the laws to look out for, and it's more important that you consult with them before you look to acquire. And those interested in coming to the development space, as well as keeping with professional ethics, you need to pick up your license, register. He's a member of the disciplinary committee, and he's been saying that they've been very strict on discipline amongst its membership. It's been an interesting time discussing this with you.
Thank you very much.
Wishing you the
Same
rest of the
here.
visit today.
Yes, thank you.